guys, I had one of the worst things happen, like the worst, like one of those dreadful things that it's so awful to experience because you just don't know what to do. I had writer's block. It was awful. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to say. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do next. And I was so busy that I didn't even have the right words for it to come out of me. And it was just like I lost the motivation. And here I am talking about consistency and I'm losing motivation. And it was just like interesting because it is a very, you teach what you need to learn situation. And so I did what most writers probably would never do, but I did it anyway. And I decided I went on TikTok. Yes. Yeah. I went on TikTok and I discovered that there's so many articles and so many videos and so many reels and they're all saying the same damn thing. They're all saying signs and symptoms. And it could drive a person crazy if you're like new to this, like, okay, that's great and all, but how does that help me? How does that do anything except for tell me a million times that I'm having a spiritual awakening? And it's like, it's interesting to me because like I've talked about this before, but it's so interesting. Like, okay, so there's this common thread of like, when it comes to spiritual awakening and Kundalini, there isn't a lot out there. There really isn't. Sure, it's been trending a lot better since it used to be. But in general, like the material is just not covered as fluently as it could be. We're going to change that. And I'll tell you right now, if you're listening and you know advice that could help somebody with spiritual awakening, you should be getting out there and saying it because we are all sick and tired of hearing the signs and symptoms and stages of spiritual awakening. I don't know about you, but I'm really tired of looking at it. I'm tired of seeing it. It's all over TikTok. It's all over YouTube. It's like, I get it. I have numerology. I get it. We're breaking the matrix. I get it. Like Christ consciousness. Awesome. What is the practical side of spirituality? What do we do with that? So my writer's block completely disappeared in that moment. And I was filled with tons of inspiration for February. And I'll tell you what, this is how the downloads actually happen, guys. This is your behind the scenes look of how downloads actually occur. It is not no smooth sailing, like let's meditate into the sunset situation. Like half the time it is, you have to really dig deep. Where does that leave us? Okay. So I did my own research and it caused a ton of inspiration. So today I want to talk about why you may be struggling with Ascension symptoms. Let's dive in. Hey there, I am Ashley from theawakenstate.net. If you like these videos, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for weekly notifications. All right, so hey, here's the thing, guys. This is one of those topics that I really want to emphasize that it will be different depending on where you're at when it comes to spiritual awakening. However, the principle, the general explanation is usually the same. So here's why you might be struggling when it comes to Ascension symptoms. Now, we have to go back here and look at, I've had my awakening around 2011. I experienced a Kundalini awakening. So it was an abrupt shift. It was not it wasn't no cupcakes and rainbows and unicorn situation. It was very abrupt. It was day and night, light switch flicked. And it was very abrupt. And so I had to personally learn how to navigate through that. And that's why I created the Roadmap series to help you navigate just the basics of learning how to get started with what the heck is happening with me. What do I do next? What part of the journey am I on? And so forth. So that's in the Roadmap series that I just released at roadmap.theawakenstate.net. So with this in mind, I had this epiphany of creating this roadmap. And it got me thinking a lot about how we all experience different signs and symptoms at different phases. one person who is going through the beginning phase, who might be in like the soul wanderer phase, for example, who's the very beginner, the person who is even unaware that they're even going through a spiritual awakening, that person's going to have different symptoms than the person who is in the dark night of the soul or the healing phase. And it's also interesting because in that same regard, the person that's going through a healing phase and going through like healing past life, or not even, I don't want to say past life, past wounds or past traumas or just emotional healing, that person's going to be totally different in terms of their symptoms than the person who is maybe working on limited beliefs and manifestation and so forth. And I think, wow, that alone is really powerful because you can start to see how a spiritual awakening beginner might be having wild symptoms appear, such as, thinking they're crazy, having their entire life flipped upside down, thinking that they have like all this stuff to clean and all of this stuff to clear up and all this stuff to change and all this stuff is coming up for them. And that person might not even be consciously aware that they're in a spiritual awakening. And so their symptoms can range wildly different, such as they might be having out-of-body experiences. Their intuition might be turning on at full blast because they're opening up the higher faculties in their mind. They might also be experiencing such as, hypersensitivity, where they're starting to become an empath, but they don't even understand that they're an empath yet. So they're starting to experience the symptoms of being an empath, where they're feeling other people's emotions. They're sensitive to television. They're sensitive to their environment. They're sensitive to going to the grocery store and so forth, but they don't understand that part of themselves. Now, those symptoms are often due to the higher chakras turning on. Now, when I mean that, what's happening is a lot of the times when you have depersonalization, you are dissociating from reality. You're focusing more on those higher chakras. And so that's actually what's going on is all of these chakras are overactive and they have nowhere to release and travel. So what is happening with that is most people, when they're in the beginning stage of the journey, it's like they've activated their Kundalini energy, their divine feminine energy, their Shanti, and all of that energy is rising upward into the higher chakras. So before, they were only in those lower chakras, and that's how they were just living life. So when we have a spiritual awakening, we're waking up all of these higher chakras, and that's becoming more open to different information, new perspectives, new awareness, new insights, spiritual knowledge. All of this is suddenly flooded, wide open. It's kind of like you shook up like a can of pop and it like explodes because you have all of this energy starting to come and rise up. And so because of that, all of the higher chakras are super overactive, and that's what's making it so taxing on the nervous system. So here's what you can start to do about that. You can start to realize that you need actually more tools that are focused on grounding out those lower chakras. You need tools on working on getting rid of that excess energy. Because what you'll find is when it comes to Kundalini waking up, there's an excess of energy starting to come up. And so when you have those overactive chakras, what is occurring is you are having like information flooding into the crown chakra and opening up in the third eye and the throat chakra and so forth. So all of that energy is starting to waken and open up, and essentially it's like an excess amount of energy. Now, what you'll find, though, is you don't understand any of it. So you'll have spiritual insights. You'll have an explosion of intuition from your third eye. You'll have clear audience starting to appear out of random because you're opening up your throat chakra and you never experienced that before. You'll start to have like that sensation of where you're kind of like mind reading someone. That's all coming from the throat chakra. All of these little symptoms are coming up because those chakras are overactive. And they're overactive because they're turning on, because they were dormant. Like when we have a spiritual awakening or a Kundalini awakening, we have a bunch of dormant energy. And then Kundalini happens, and that rising energy of Shanti happens, and then it starts to open up more our masculine and feminine energy, and that is what starts to awaken our alignment. So we start to come more into that spiritual essence of who we are versus just the material self. Okay, so are you with me so far? So when it comes to looking at the difference between those symptoms and somebody who's on the healing or growth journey, it's like we have to also realize that a lot of the times what's going on is these higher chakras are overactive, which means we need to balance them out by working on the lower chakras. And I'll tell you right now, the very practical way of looking at this is a lot of what happens, and this is very common, is when you first have a spiritual awakening, you have an overactive third eye, an overactive crown, and an overactive throat chakra. And the reason for this is you're turning on energy that you've never turned on before. And because of this, what happens is it triggers you to dissociate because you're not used to it. Because you're not used to feeling those sensations in your body. You're not used to hearing your intuition that clearly. You're not used to feeling any of this. So you naturally were suppressing it for X number of years. So now that it's turning on at full blast, you're like suddenly driving on the highway with the radio on full volume, and you're like, whoa, when did that happen? That energy is starting to turn on. Now, because of this, your job is to do the opposite of what people would tell you, is go meditate more, go visualize and sing Kumbaya and do a bunch of drugs. No, what you actually need to be doing is you need to ground and root back into your body, because that will drown out the excess energy. Now, this is contrary to a lot of advice out there, because what you find is that, okay, when you have overactive chakras, what is occurring is you're usually in flight mode. So you've activated flight mode in your survival mechanism, fight, flight, freeze. So when this happens, this is why the symptoms are so rapid and exhausting and very taxing on the nervous system, is you have triggered flight mode. So the best thing you can do is get out of the head and back into the body. So in other words, start looking at movement practices, yoga, Kundalini yoga, walking, gardening, doing something that really helps you ground besides just visualizing yourself as a tree. Like focusing more on those grounding root chakra, the stability of the sacral chakra, and the coming back into your power with the solar plexus chakra will help drastically, because those lower chakras will help balance out your higher chakras and why they're so overactive. Another thing you can do besides working on movement is working on the root chakra. And most importantly, when it comes to working with the root chakra, it's all about feeling supported and safe. So focusing on safety and support is a massive way to really ground out and root out that energy. And then most importantly, when you have a bunch of this overactive energy, it seems so contradictory, but if you think about it, we're releasing energy. So you need to find a way to release that energy through a creative channel, such as talking or writing or, journaling, or you could go on a run, or you could do something physical movement, because what's occurring is you have just a bunch of excess energy. So in order to properly channel that, you need to channel it through you in whatever way is most comfortable for you. So for example, when you feel a sense of depersonalization, you should be tapping back into the reality and connecting with somebody. Because connecting with a person will help you feel less depersonalization, because you're kind of having like an out-of-body experience. The best thing you can do is come back into your body and connect with someone, have a conversation, do something mundane. And that's what I kind of also wanted to touch on when it comes to also feeling these sensations of really getting, hyperempathy, hypersensitivity, out-of-body experiences, feeling your heightened intuition to a point where it's hard to control, maybe even having the experience where I did, where you felt like you couldn't even control your energy. It felt like it wouldn't turn off, and it just was this like hyper empathetic, like explosion kind of energy. And this is all about really getting your mind clear on you want to focus on when it comes to really looking at energy management and understanding how to properly manage your energy. You want to be focused more on getting grounded with those higher chakras and to start taking that energy and bringing it, releasing it, essentially. Now, on the other spectrum, when it comes to looking at the healing symptoms that are coming up with, such as a dark night of the soul, or looking into how, like, when we go through healing stages where we have something come up for us and it's kind of like a spiritual assignment, and then we get triggered and then we're having like an emotional reaction to it. So it's bringing it up for healing and clearing. And then a lot of times we might have physical symptoms that are associated with that. That's a lot of what occurs with the ascension symptoms that often happen during either dark night of the soul or during a healing phase. Now, in this spectrum, it might be totally opposite, because what is occurring is you might be having more of a conversation of where you actually need to be working on the higher chakras instead of the lower chakras. And instead, you might be wanting to focus on how you can cultivate your intuition, how you can step more into a place of hearing clearly with your throat chakra, and you might want to be tapping more into multiple perceptions with the crown chakra. So it's kind of interesting how there's like a balancing act going on here, where if you're new on the journey, it might be you want to be paramount on focus on those lower chakras, grounding, feeling safe, feeling supported. And also, this was the other thing I wanted to mention, is you might be experiencing spiritual burnout. This is a topic I've covered before, and it's very common, is you might be having what is known as spiritual burnout. And this is also another symptom that can show up, is when you're hungry for information and you're constantly downloading all the things, and you're listening to like 5 different channelings that say contradicting information, and then you're reading or you're buying like 20 to 30 personal development books, and you're signing up for all the courses, and you're doing all these things, but the reality is you're not integrating any of that information. You're stuck in spiritual burnout, where you're trying to rely on the tarot cards for the answers. You're trying to get fixated on the latest guru or the latest thing. And what occurs from this place of spiritual burnout is you're like in la la land, and like you have forgotten like the mundane side of reality. And it kind of just makes you really ungrounded, really anxiety prone, and it kind of puts you in that place of looking at conspiracy theories and going down black holes and tripping up about pyramids, and all that's good and all, but like it's also important to realize that we can very easily get into that headspace when our higher chakras are open. And so that's another symptom that isn't talked about enough, is we can have a place of spiritual burnout. And that place of spiritual burnout will make you feel like depersonalization, where you feel dissociated from your body, where you have those out-of-body experiences. You're spiritually burnt out. That's what's happening. And so the other like very damaging thing that can happen is like when you're obsessing about the tarot cards and you're looking outside of you for answers all the time, it's often a sign that you don't trust your intuition. So there's nothing wrong with any of these tools or things, but when we're like doing it in excess and we're very overactive in those chakras, it's like we lost sight with our true intuition. We lost sight with who we are, and inevitably it's kind of like it's like a sign from the universe, like, dude, stop looking outside of you. Look within you for the answers, because it's showing you almost this mentality of like you're spiritual fangirling right now, and you're relying on everybody else to tell you the answers. But the reality is you can only heal yourself by tuning within. You can only heal yourself by listening within, by developing self-trust, by developing self-care. And ultimately, I always say, and this is like the funniest advice when you think about when it comes to spiritual burnout, is go do something mundane. Stop the drugs. Stop the excessive meditating. Drop the tarot cards, the crystals, drop all of it and go do something normal. Like go shopping, watch a movie, play a board game, play a video game, do something silly, do something human, do something like it can be anything. Spend a day at the beach. Like allow your mind to detach. I know that's like the funniest advice, but I'm telling you, if you are there in experiencing the vicarious of information where it's just like it's exploding and you're overwhelmed and it's like you constantly want to, it's like you're at this point where you have so much information being thrown at you that you don't even know what is right or what is wrong. You're searching for your intuition. This phase of being the soul searcher, please go step back, allow, integrate, detach, because this will help you more because it will allow you to tap naturally into your intuition. For example, these 3 methods of really looking at how you can start to ease your ascension symptoms are so much more valuable than me just saying, go get grounded, or here's all the symptoms of spiritual awakening. I want you to take away from this video that you can easily start to balance out those symptoms. A lot of it is due to an incongruence in our energy field. And the more that we can start to look at, okay, well, am I more of a beginner? Then I need to focus more on those, on the lower chakras. I need to focus more on getting out of that place where I feel ungrounded and unsafe and I feel like out of body because of all of the explosion of energy that's happening? Or do I feel in the middle where I'm spiritually burnt out? I'm to a place where I'm burnt out and I just feel like I'm overwhelmed by all of the spiritual nonsense. And it's just like, now I'm in rabbit holes of, is anything real? Or maybe I don't even exist and this is all of a dream. When you're in that headspace, ground back out, do something mundane, connect to your body, and do something normal. Or could you be in the 3rd phase where you're more so in the place where you're trying to heal? You're trying to look at life more from a place of a higher perspective, a place where you are tuning back into your body. You're more grounded in those lower chakras, but maybe it's time to readjust those higher chakras. Maybe it's time to strengthen intuition. Focus on shifting your perspective in the 3rd eye, focusing more on building out your ability of channeling and your gifts of clairaudience or clairvoyance or clairsentience. Or maybe it's more about digging into the crown chakra and finding that balance between detachment and attachment and focusing in on how you can really allow your self-beliefs to develop and focusing in on that. Now, what you'll find is all of these things are different. And I think that's so important to touch on because where I'm at in the journey may be different than where you're at in the journey. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't want to be very arrogant and be like, I never have ascension symptoms anymore. And it's like, yeah, sure, that is true. But I've done a ton of work to get there. And I'm very transparent about that. I've done a ton of work to get there. I've studied countless things. I've been on the journey for a while. I don't want to discredit your journey by saying otherwise. But I also think it's really crucial to talk on you can heal your ascension symptoms. It's so much easier than a lot of people make it out to be. And I'm here to change the conversation. I'm here to walk forward and change the conversation with you. And that's what we're going to be starting to focus on at the Awakened State. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this episode on ascension symptoms and what you can start to do about it. And most importantly, if you like our videos, please hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.